Now if there ever comes a time when you're viewing the results of your query where you get duplicate records there and you just want to see unique records, for example, when I come up here and click on the Run button, I have three fields here: the customer name, book title, and sales date. Now what would make this record, or records in this query here, the output, duplicates, is that if I had the same value in the customer name, also with the same value there, have a corresponding same value for the book title for that customer, like Disney Company. Well, let's look at this one, Getting the Law of Attraction. I also have Disney Company, Getting the Law of Attraction. So up until this point, they're duplicate, but because we have another field, these three fields make up a record, at least for the output view here. So you can see that this one was purchased in August and the other one was purchased in April, so it's not duplicate. But if I get rid of this sales date field, go to the design view, come up here, click on that gray bar, so I can go ahead and select everything below it, the entire column, then hit the delete key to remove it, and go back to my datasheet view. You can see I still have the same results with the Disney Company, duplicate values here, and then over in the next field, in that same record, for that company, we have duplicate values here. Getting the Law of Attraction, Getting the Law of Attraction. So in other words, I'm trying to create a query now where I want to go ahead and just pull up all the book titles that each company has purchased. I don't need the transaction data or anything, and I don't need to see two or more copies of it. So to go ahead and change this and omit those records that contain the same values, Disney Company, Getting the Law, and displaying only one, go back to the design view and pull up the property sheet for the entire query by coming up here on the Design tab to the Show Hide group and clicking on the property sheet, or just come up here and right click in a blank area and go down to Properties and make sure that the selection type is for the entire query. Because if I have a field down below that's selected, it's the field properties, for the selection there. So to bring up the properties for the entire query, after you bring up the property sheet, just go ahead and click in a blank area in the top section. And you can see it's the properties for the entire query. Come down here, you see where it says unique values. The default's no. Double click to set it to yes and it will take care of that problem. In other words, the definition of the unique value here when you select it is to omit records with duplicate data in the fields displayed in the datasheet view. Or to put it another way, we only want to see records in which the values of all the fields displayed in the datasheet view are unique. Not just one field, all of them. Right now we just have two fields, customer name and book title. And remember, we had the Disney Company, which we had duplicated. There's one field. And then we had the book title for the same company listed twice, Getting the Law of Attraction Work for You. So it's all fields. If it sees duplicates in both those fields in two or more records, it hides all of them except for one by turning this to yes. Let's go ahead and click the Fun Run button, and there we go. Disney Company, Getting the Law of Attraction to Work for You. Only listed once. No duplicate records here. Going back to the design view and selecting the top section here so I can look over in the property sheet, and then I can go ahead and double click that to no. Below that you have unique records. And the unique record, when you want to use that, double click it to change it to yes, is used to return on unique records based on all fields in the underlying data source. Not just what you pull over or up in the output view, the datasheet view, by adding the fields down below in the grid, but in all the underlying tables. So unique values is what we want to see, applies to just what we see in the output view. Unique records will apply to all the records, not just those that are being pulled and shown in the datasheet view. And you'll notice that both of them can be no at the same time, but if I double click on the unique records and then I go up and double click on the unique values, neither one of them can be yes. It's either one or the other. One final note is that you can't make any changes in the datasheet view. Well, why not? Well, when it's set to unique values and you come up here and you click the Run button, it's just a snapshot of the data. It doesn't return the complete set of records, so it's not safe or accurate, as you won't know what record you're updating. So with the feature turned on, unique values, and I come in here and I try to delete or type, notice down below in the stat bar here it says the record set is not updatable. That is until I go back to the design view, click in a blank area to pull up the property sheet for the query properties and change it back to double click no. And then click on the Run button and then come down in here, hit the backspace and delete and make changes, and in any case I'm going to hit the escape key so it doesn't save my change. A wildcard query is using a wildcard, which is the asterisk symbol, in the criteria field to help it filter for a name that you're not sure about. I know that doesn't make sense, but give me just a second. Have you ever tried to find a name within a record but you're not sure the spelling of the name? For example, Let's say that I want to look up the Disney company, but I'm not sure if it's spelled with an S or a Z. I know you can see it right here, but pretend we have hundreds or thousands of records that we don't want to scroll through to find it. So what I could do, as you recall in the Access Level 1 training videos, come up here on the Home tab to the Find group, click on the Find button, and type in what you want to find, which is, well, I know it begins with DI, but when I click Find Next, it's not going to find it because the setting here is trying to match the whole field of what I'm looking for in the customer name. And I don't have a customer name that just is DI. So I could select any part of the field within the customer name that has DI in it, click Find Next, and it finds it. Now, using a wildcard, when I click on the drop-down arrow and choose Hold Field, is that when I come after DI, because it begins with DI, and I type in that wildcard, the asterisk symbol, what's it saying here is it's saying, okay, it starts with DI, and then everything after that's wild. It could be anything. It's wild. So go ahead and click Find Next, and it does find the Disney company, the DI, and then it has additional characters after it, so it satisfies the demand here that it match the entire field, because the asterisk saying it doesn't care about the rest of the field. It's just that it begins with DI. Well, you could look at this and say, well, why would I want to use the asterisk if I could just go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow and use any part of field? Well, that's fine when you're in the datasheet view of your query, but when you're in the design view and you want to filter for something like that that begins with DI, so for example, come down here in the criteria field and I just type in DI, you know that when I go ahead and click the Run button, it's just looking for the exact match, the customer name DI. When I click on it, I don't have a customer named DI, so when I go back to the design view and I delete it, I can go ahead and use that wildcard, the asterisk symbol, DI, asterisk, so it begins with DI, and then the wildcard says, well, there's stuff that comes after it, I'm just not sure what. Hit the Tab key, and upon exit, Access goes back and it says, okay, you forgot to add the word like, and then quotes around your DI and asterisks. Fine, but it added it for me, so when I click on the Run button, there we go, it found it. I mean, if I had more that begin with DI, then they would pull here, right? But in any case, I could try to get a little bit more particular when it comes to filtering with that wildcard. And how can you do it? Well, go back to the design view. I could really try to shake things up here and say, okay, asterisks, in this case, it begins with something, I'm not sure what it begins with, and then it's got an NE in there somewhere, then there's something after it, I'm not sure if it's a Y. So when I hit the Tab key, you've got the asterisk in front of it, the asterisk behind it, and so it's looking for anything within this field that has NE. Of course, it doesn't begin with NE. The asterisk symbol, the wildcard, says it begins with something. We just don't know what. It could be one character, two characters, one or more. So we'll go ahead and hit the Run button, and we got a few results here. There's NE in Cleaners, NE in Disney, and NE in News. A parameter query is a flexible query that prompts the user for additional criteria, instead of having them come over here in the design view, down into the criteria field and type in the criteria. For example, if I've got quite a few customer names that I need to look up to see if they're within our database, every time I'd have to come down in here in the criteria field and type it in, and then run it, come back, type it in, and then run it. Well, here, with the parameter query, I can create a prompt that says, okay, enter in the customer name, they can type it in, and it will display the results. Not only that, but I can give you a shortcut keys, so instead of flashing between view and running it again, just hold those keys and it'll automatically rerun that parameter query. So first of all, we need to enter in some code, really simple. Come down here in the criteria cell for the field that we want the parameter to be based upon. In other words, we want to look up the customer name or have the prompt for it, and then type in open square bracket, and then enter in the prompt that's going to display for the user to tell them what they need to enter in or what you need in this criteria field. And for this field, it's the customer name, so I'm going to prompt them to enter a customer. When I'm done, close square bracket, hit the Tab key because upon exit, it'll check my work. If it likes it, I won't get any errors. And then all I have to do is go ahead and click Run. Again, the square brackets in the criteria field is what's going to pull up that prompt. And then, of course, what we have in between those square brackets is what's going to be displayed in the prompt. So click on the Run button, and there it is, the prompt, or the parameter. Enter in the customer name. When I'm done, hit Enter. Hey, that's so cool. So we've got 2 records, fall cleaning. Now, if I want to go ahead and run this again, see, before this training video, I'd have to go back to the design view down the criteria field and then type in my next criteria, like I think we have the Disney company that I want to search for or find within the customer name field. But now that we have the parameter query, we can go ahead and just rerun this again. You don't have to come back to the design view and click the Run button again, but instead, here's the shortcut key. hold down the Shift key and hit the F9 key, and it just brings the prompt back up again. The parameter value that we're looking for now this time is CO, hit enter, fantastic. Now that's great if the person who's using the parameter query knows the full name of the customer that they're looking for. If they don't, then they'll run into problems, right? Well, we can tweak our parameter query. As you recall, in fact, in the previous training video, we used what's called a wildcard, where we said we know the first couple letters of the name that we're looking for in the customer name field, but we don't know the rest. That's all we need to do here is just to tweak it and say, hey, look, enter in the first couple letters of a customer's name that you want to search for. And there's benefits for that for two reasons. The first one, as I just mentioned, if they don't know the customer name but the first couple letters. Second of all, we're saving time on data entry. They can just type in the first couple letters. I mean, if they know the full name, great, because sometimes when you type in the first couple letters, if you have a lot of customers with the same first couple letters in their name, then obviously that's not going to be as helpful than entering in the full name, but at least you can narrow it down. So let's go back to our design view, come back down here, click in the cell, and let's zoom in on the cell because I don't like seeing half of it. So Shift F2, the keys, to zoom in, and then come up here, and let's click before the first open square bracket at the beginning and type in the word like, okay? Then I'll explain this in just a second. Let me go ahead and make the changes. And then let's go ahead and delete the text in between the two square brackets and type in, enter in the couple letters of a customer name or customer's name, and then at the end, ampersand asterisk. Now the ampersand symbol links the parameter values to the wildcard. As you recall in the previous training video, when we used it in the criteria field, we typed in the first couple letters and then the wildcard. But because we're using a parameter here, where we're prompting the user for the parameter, in this case the customer's name, it's saying, okay, let's link this to the wildcard. So when they type in the first couple letters, then anything that comes after it, well, it doesn't matter, as long as they know the first couple letters. Notice how I also add the word like. And remember earlier on in an earlier training video I said that when you type in some coding in some of the cells, that upon exit, Access checks the work and it will clean up for you some of the times, not all the time. Well, this is one of those times it doesn't clean up after us. So we have to enter in the word like. Because as you recall in the previous training video, when we typed in the first couple of letters and then the asterisk, and upon exit, it went back and it added the like, the prefix, and then put quotes around it. It'll put quotes around here where it needs to be, but it won't add like. Click OK, hit the Tab key, and then when I go back and I right click and I zoom in, it added the quotes around the asterisk, okay? And it capitalized the L in like. In any case, let's go ahead and test it. Click on the Run button. Okay, first couple letters. Let's see, GH for ghost. Hit enter. Cool. Okay, let's kick it up one more notch here. How about if we're dealing with transaction dates? You know, you have a start date and end date. For example, I want to be able to find out the customer, Ghost Hunters, and the books that they've purchased between a given transaction date. So in other words, I'm going to set up not just one, but a second parameter. Coming up here, going to the design view. To do that, I want the sales date, transaction date, double click to add that down below in the grid. So that displays. So after they answer the first question, the first parameter that's set up, I also want them to enter in a sales date. So they have to satisfy both of these parameters. Let me go ahead and do Shift F2 to zoom in so you can see everything that I'm typing. And what I want to set up here is the parameter that prompts them for the start date and the end date. You can do one or the other, but I'm going to do both. And then you can reverse engineer that and just say, well, if I just want the start date, then just do that. So I'm going to type in between, open square bracket, and then type in enter, close square bracket, and open square bracket, and then close square bracket. Okay? Going to go ahead and click OK. Hit the Tab key to make sure that it accepts what I typed in there. So when I right click and I zoom in, let me break this down. And you can see it capitalized the A in and it added the space in between the, well, first parameter and then and the second parameter. I mean, it'll clean up a little bit for me. So what it's saying is that it's in between two dates. Okay, give me the beginning date, give me the end date. Click cancel. Let's go ahead and click on the Run button. Here's the first parameter. Well, the first couple letters. Let's do GH for ghost. Hit enter. So it's storing that, so it knows it's looking for any customer names that begin with GH, and then it says, okay, what's the start date? And we'll say it's 8/1/08, hit enter, and then the end date is going to be 10/31/08, hit enter, and cool. If you rewind the video just a bit, you recall that when we searched for GH for Ghost Hunters America, they purchased a lot more books than what we see here, but with the second criteria or parameter, we said that it had to be between two dates. August 1st and October 31st of '08. The update query is an action query that will make changes to values within a table. For example, I've got my book project table, and what field of values do I want to change? Let's go ahead and update the book price and increase it by, let's say, 5%. Maybe not all of the records, but just those records whose part number begins with 10 or 14. None of the 11s, okay? So I went ahead and I created my query based upon this table. It's the retail price. Go ahead and let me double click and open it up. I've got the part number, book title, book price, and a new field that I added. It's a custom calculating field, as we learned how to do in the custom calculating training video. In any case, to break it down, over here you can see that I'm only pulling up those books whose part number begins with 10 or 14, none of the 11s. In fact, let me go ahead and take you to the design view here and show you. Here's the criteria for the part number field. You can see it's like 10 or like 14, and there's the asterisk. As you recall in the past couple of training videos, it's the wildcard. So it means in this case that the part number field has to begin with 10, and then the wildcard says it doesn't matter what comes after it. There's additional characters, but it has to begin with 10 or 14, one or the other, and because both of them are available or show up in the table, it'll pull here in my query. And then there's the book title field, the book project, and then the new custom calculating field that I added, which when I right click and zoom in, you can take a look at it. As you recall in the custom calculating field training video, anything to the left hand side of the colon is going to be the name of the field, and then to the right you go ahead and you enter in the name of the field that you want to perform a calculation on in square brackets, and in this case I multiplied it by 1.05 or 5%. Of course you see the asterisk here. It means something different. It's not a wildcard, it's actually performing the calculation, multiplying these two fields. Okay, click OK. I did that only because I wanted to see what it looks like and compare the original book price to what it would be when I perform this update. I don't need this. I can go ahead and just delete it here. That's got nothing to do with creating my update query. Now to convert this to an update query, just come up here on the Design tab to the Query Type group. You've got these action queries here, and there it is, Update. Click on it, and boom. It does two things. It converts it to an update query. As you can see when I hover off of it, it's selected. And down below it adds an Update To field down below here in the grid. So what I need to do is define the field that I want to update to, the values within it, and it's going to be the book price field, and then in its corresponding Update To cell just below it, go ahead and type in that formula. In other words, open square brackets and then the name of the field that we want to update, and there it is. When I start typing, it pulls up the two fields that are available in the table that this query is based upon, book price or book title. Once it pulls up, you can arrow down or arrow up to select the one that you want to be able to perform the calculation with. Hit the tab key and it pulls it in. And then asterisk to multiply by 1.05. So it's looking at the book price field and it's going to apply this update to it, taking it, multiplying it by 1.05, and that will be the new book price. I'm going to go ahead and hit the tab key to make sure that Access checks my work. I don't get any errors, and that's it. All you have to do is come up here and click on the Run button. When I click on the Run button, it'll actually run the query. Now here's the difference between using the View button and the Run button. When you're working with action queries, and the Update query is an action query, that when you click on the Run button, it'll perform the action. Now, if I'm hesitant and I'm a little bit leery going, oh man, I'm going to be updating, let's pretend, tens of thousands of records. Do I really want to do this? Well, there's two things you can consider before you actually run it. You can actually go ahead and click on the View button and view the field that you're going to be updating and see if this is something that you don't have any second thoughts, because until you actually run it, it's not going to update the field here, okay? Back to our design view here. And as you can see, it didn't show the other fields. And if that doesn't satisfy you because you can't see the other fields, then you may just want to go back to the select query, and it adds the check boxes here that you can go ahead and click on the view button, see them and double check, sweat some more, then go back to the design view, and then go ahead and select update. And you can see it still has my calculation there in the Update To field for the book price field, so I don't have to retype it in. And then the second thing you can do is actually make a backup of the table. So if you go ahead and click Run, and then later on you're like, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Boy, that's a lot of work if you have thousands of records. So instead, go ahead and right click on it, make a copy of it, and then find a blank area down below and right click and click on paste. If you can't find a blank area because you got so many access objects down below, then come up on the Home tab and click on the paste button. And then it says, okay, we'll go ahead and we'll copy and paste the structure and the data, the records, in the copy of your book project table. Click Okie dokie. So we have the original here, we have the backup, okay? So now back here, let me click on the Design tab so I can go ahead and see my Run button. When I click Run, and it multiplies everything by 1.05, I've got a backup now so I don't have to sweat bullets if I made a mistake. Okay, I'm dragging this out. Let's just go ahead and do it. Let me go back to the book project table. Remember, it's $34.50. When I come back here to the query, back to the Design tab and click Run, uh-oh, it's not working. Well, if you notice down here in the status bar, it says the action or event has been blocked by disabled mode. What that means is that I probably have my settings for access set up to not allow any macros to run or any codes. So what I have to do is I have to come up here, click on the File tab, go down to Options, come to the Trust Center, go to the Trust Center settings, go to the macro settings, and you can see it disables all macros with notification. Well, I didn't get any notification, at least not in the message bar, because it says never show information about block content. I can change that to always show, or better yet, just not mess with it right now and just say, okay, enable all macros. I mean, it warns you, it says, hey, it could be dangerous, but look, if I'm the one that's creating this database and nobody else, would I create code to damage my own computer? I mean, intentionally, maybe by mistake. In any case, you get my point. Let's go ahead and click OK. And then if you come up here and you try to click Run again, it's not going to work because you have to close your database and open it back up for that setting to take place. So let's go ahead and save our work. Come up here, click on File, go to Save Object As, and let's name it QUPD for Q Query UPD for Update, and say it's my, and then click OK. So click on the File tab again to get back, and notice over here in the Query section in the navigation pane that it's got the symbol that represents, as you can see up here, the update query, a pencil and an exclamation point, as opposed to a select query where it's not an action query, where you go ahead and you open it up, you click the Run button, it's not going to perform any action. Okay, so let's go ahead and close out of the database. Looks like we've got some stuff on our clipboard when we copied and pasted and we created our backup table. This will cause it to empty the clipboard. Do you want to continue? Yes. Open up Access. Over on the left-hand side, it lists the four most recent databases I've been working on. The most recent of recents is at the top. Flex Query. Click on that. Opens it up. It's down below. The Update Query. Now, you don't want to click on this because if you double-click on it right now, it's going to run the action query, unless you want to do that. So if I double-click on it, it says, you're about to run an update query. Do you want to do this? Oh, no. Close out. You can right-click, go to the Design view, and then click on the Run button, and go ahead and run it from there. I mean, we're so used to double-clicking on these select queries, these non-action queries, to open it up in the datasheet view. Well, when you have an action query like this, don't double-click on it unless you're sure you want to run it. In any case, it tells me that we're about to update 17 rows of data. Are you sure you want to do this? Click Yes, and that's it. Let's go ahead and open up our book project table. Double-click. It used to be $34.50 for the basic medical billing book. There we go. It did its job. It increased it by 5%. And of course, I can come back in here and just go nuts. Click on the Design tab and go, oh, let's run it again. Yes, I could just go mad with price increases here, and hopefully somebody will buy it at such a high price. And then, of course, go back to the book project table, and you can see it increased it. It was $36, now it's $38. So be careful, run it once, and if you don't want to run it again, then don't double-click on it, or don't come back in here on the Design tab and click on the Run button. The Append Action Query allows you to add records from one table into another, albeit before you can do that, you got to make sure that these tables match in field names and data type. So for example, I've got my book project table and new projects, part number, book title, so they have the same matching names. Well, you can check all the fields have matching names here in both tables, and then also they have to have the same data type. So if I right click and go to Design View, part number has text, book title has text, right click, go to Design View, part number has text, book title has text. Project Manager in this table is the third field. In the new projects, it's the last field. It doesn't matter the order. Just make sure that the field name is the same as the table that you want to append the records into. And of course the data type as we just went over. Let me go ahead and right click and go back to the datasheet view and right click to the datasheet view. Now over in the new project table, these are the records that I want to append. Let's say it's just those whose part number begins with 15. So I want to go ahead and create an append action query that will append the records, but with the criteria just those records whose part numbers begin with 15. So come up here, click on the Create tab, go to the Queries group, click on Query Design, And then come down here and let's double click to add the new project table to the query. Close out, hover over the bottom, click and drag to stretch it open. In fact, let me grab the split bar, click and drag that up just a bit. Now what I like to do with all my action queries is to test it before I actually perform the action to make sure I'm not making a mistake. Okay? So right now, up on the Design tab in the Query Type group, it's a select query. No action is going to be performed when I hit the Run button. So let me go ahead and set it up, and then when it looks good and I get the results that I want in the select query as the select query type here, then I'll go ahead and convert it to an append query and run it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and double click the asterisk, and what that does is it adds all the fields when I click on this and view it in the datasheet view. And there it is, all the fields. Okay. Back to the design view because I want to append all those fields or the data in those fields into the book project table. But not just all the records. Again, it's just those books with the part number title beginning with 15, so I want to set up a separate field here for my criteria. I mean, obviously, I want to set the criteria up for all the fields here. First of all, it won't accept it. Second of all, I mean, every field has different data, so this pulls in all the fields, and then I'm going to go ahead and double click on the part number so I can set the criteria up for that. And as you recall, in the past couple of training videos, we've been using the wildcard. Well, it's the same here. Type in 15 asterisk, hit the tab key. Again, the asterisk is the wildcard. So that way, any part number that begins with 15, it'll go ahead and pull in. The asterisk means that all the rest of the data that comes after it, it doesn't matter. Could be anything, but it must begin with 15. Now I can go ahead and view it right now, but when I view it, it's pulling all the fields here, including the part number, but I also have the part number listed again, and I don't need to see it. I just need to use the field to perform or set the criteria. So if I uncheck it, I won't see it when I click on the View button. There it is, part number, book title, scroll over to the right. I don't have two part numbers, just one. So after viewing it, and scrolling back, and seeing that it's only pulling those books whose part number begins with 15, then great. Let's go back to the Design view and convert this to an append query and run it. Come up here on the Design tab, come down here to the Query Type group, click on the Append button, and then it says, okay, of the records that you pull up in here, or that when you run this query, where do you want to append them to? What's the name of the table? Click on the drop-down arrow. It's going to be the book project table. Click OK. And then down below in the grid, it adds the Append To row, and so it's adding all of the fields in the new projects table to all the fields, or all the data, with the matching fields in the book project table. And part number is part of this, and I don't need to do it again, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it from here. Again, I just want this to be the criteria part, not add part number twice. Besides, it'll give me an error. It won't like that. So I'm deleting it as part of the append to. And then that's it. If I'm ready, I can go ahead and click Run. If I click on the View button, I can take a look at it one last time before I hit the Run button. And then go back to the Design view, hit Run. It says you're about to append 3 rows. Remember, that's what we had. The criteria showed that there were only 3 records with the part number that begins with 15 there. Go ahead and click Yes. And let's take a look at our book project table. Is 15 in here? Of course not. Because we had the table left open, we need to come up here on the Home tab to the Records group to refresh it. And there we go, it just added it. Those 3 down below. Go back to the new project table, click Refresh, and you can see that it didn't remove them. It kept them here. It just added them or copied them over into the book project table. So let's go back to the query. If I need to do this again for some reason, I want to save it and not have to recreate this query, come up here, click on the Save button, type in Q for query, APP for append, so it's an append query. My appends. Sounds like a diaper. Go ahead and click OK. You'll notice the icon over here. Let me come up and click on the Design tab. It matches the append icon up here in the Query Type group. So if you don't have the prefix for your queries, Q for query, and then whether it's append or SEL for select or UPD for update, I mean, you could look at the icons and go, oh, I know if it's a pencil, it's writing. I know if it's a plus, it's adding. Whatever works best for you. I only have 3 records that I want to delete. You can imagine if you had hundreds or thousands of records that you want to delete or clear out of your table here. You want to use the delete action query. I mean, the whole point of using the query is that we can go ahead and set the criteria for those records that we want to see, and then changing or converting the query to a delete action query, we can go ahead and act upon that and say, okay, the records we see here, go ahead and just wipe them all out. So to get started, come up here, click on the Create tab, go to the Queries group, click on Query Design to open it up. and it's going to be the new project table. Double click, close out. Let me click and drag to stretch it open. And then I want to delete all those books whose part number begins with 15 because, we just added them over, as you recall in the previous training video, to our book project table. So I no longer need them in the new project table here. So I can double click and add the part number down below, add my criteria, 15, asterisk, the wildcard again. So the part number has to begin with 15. The asterisk says all the rest of the characters that come after it doesn't matter what they are, just as long as it begins with 15. Again, I can go ahead and click on the View button to test it. It pulls up 3 records. If you want to see all the fields, go back to the Design View, double click on the asterisk so you can see all of them, and then click on the View button. And then what's interesting is that you've got the part number listed twice, because one I'm using for the criteria, and the other one, as you recall back in the Design View, is pulling in all the fields, including the part number. So we've got it here once, then we got it here twice. So I don't need to show it here, so I can uncheck it. And then, of course, if you're fine with what we just saw here, we want to go ahead and delete those records. Then come up here on the Design tab to the Query Type group and click on and convert this to the Delete Action Query. Once you select it, it's ready to go. All you have to do is go ahead and click on the Run button. Let me double check my work. Click on the View button. Yeah, that's what I want to delete. Click on the Design View to go back and then go ahead and run it. Now, I'm not going to do it here. Let me close out and not save it because I already have a query. It was the Append Query that had the criteria set up to find those records whose part number begins with 15. If you watched the previous training video, well, if you remember in my previous training video here, let's go ahead and right click, go to the Design View, and instead of creating a new query from scratch, it's already here. Let's just go ahead and convert it from an Append Query to the Delete Query. Okay, so click on it, it switches, it's going to go ahead and delete where any part number that begins with number 15. So come up here, click on the Run button. It says I'm about to delete 3 rows. Am I okay with that? Click yes. Now before we check it out here, this used to be the Append Query, and you can see it's down here. What I can do is I can come up here, click on the File tab, go to Save Object As, so I don't overwrite the Append Query, so it's still an Append Query. But with the changes I make, I can go ahead and rename it and call it my, let me delete this, the prefix, Q for query, DEL for delete. So my delete query. Click Okie dokie. Click on the File tab, and there we go. I still have my Append Query. Now I have the Delete Query. That X, of course, indicates, you can see it up here, that it's the Delete Query, the icon there. It's something that you want to delete or remove or X out. And I can go ahead and close out of here. And there we go. Because I had my table open, it removed it. And if I don't want to see all these deleted fields, just go ahead and click Refresh. And then we can repeat the process as we shift more books over and append them to, as you recall in the previous training video, the book project, and delete more here. Again, I want to remind you that once you create your action queries here, don't double click on them, because when you double click on them, it'll want to run the query, actually perform the action. Instead, go ahead and right click on it, open up in Design View, and then hit the View button to view it in the datasheet view. So double clicking on it without doing it this way, it's just like coming in here and clicking on the Run button. The Make Table Action Query allows you to insert records from a query into a new table, or in other words, making a backup table with specific records. For example, I can either come up here, click on the Create tab, and create a query from scratch and then convert it to a Make Table Action Query, or just come with one of the queries that I have down below and right click on it, and then go to the Design View. Again, you don't want to double click on any of these action queries because it's like coming in here in the Design View and clicking on the Run button. We don't want to do that. We may have some updates that we don't like. In any case, what I want to do is I want to come up here, convert this from an Update Query to a Make Table Query, and then it says, okay, what name do we want to go ahead and give it? We don't want to click on the drop-down arrow because we're not adding it to a new query, but we're going to make a new table, so we'll just go ahead and type in the name. So it's my price increase backup. Click Okie dokie. And then before I go ahead and view it, or for that matter, run it, I want to make sure that the fields down below are what I would like to include in that new table when I go ahead and click on Run to make the table. Right now it's just the book price and the part number. The part number is used to be able to pull up only those books whose part numbers begin with 10 or 14. As you recall in the past couple of training videos, with these wildcards here, when you put it after, in this case the 10 or the 14, it means it doesn't matter the characters that come after, just as long as it begins with 10 or 14. So when I click on the View button, like I said, I don't want to make a new table based upon just that field. So back to the Design View, go ahead and click on the gray bar just above it, hit the Delete key to get rid of it, and then go ahead and add the asterisks. As you recall, when you double click to add the asterisks, it adds the book project table, all the fields within that table, without having me to come up here and double clicking on each one to add it. Let me go ahead and click and delete these here, okay? And then click on the view button to see, okay, these are all the records that are going to be added into my new table. And again, only those records whose part number begins with 10 or 14. Back to the design view. On the design tab, I'm good to go. Click run. I'm about to paste 17 rows into a new table. Click yes. And there it is, the new table. Price Inc. Backup. Or Price Increase Backup. Double click. Oh, that's so fun. Go ahead and close out of that. And then let me go ahead and not click save, but save it as, because if I click save, it's going to overwrite my update query as a make table query. So come up here, click on the file, go down to save object as, Q for query, make for make table, click OK, click on the file tab to take me back, and there you go. Again, this icon, when I come back up here in the query design view, matches this one up here as well. And it's got a cute little table there. I want to hit two birds with one stone here and talk to you about both the layout view and table formats. And in a way they are related. Well, I'll cover that in just a minute. But first of all, the layout view. The layout view is only available in your forms and reports. And like the design view, it allows you to make design changes to a database element, like your labels and their corresponding text boxes, but in a more general format. It's not as detailed as the design view, and it doesn't contain as many controls and features as you would find in the design view. For example, I've got my book details form here in the form view, and it's a very simplistic form. If I want to go ahead and change the layout here, the operative word being layout, I could go to the layout view if it's something simplistic or a little bit more intense, the design view. So let me go ahead and right click in a blank area. There's the two views that I'm talking about. Let's go to the layout view. And up at the top you have the related contextual tabs, design, arrange, and format, which by the way, the design tab was not available in the previous version of Access 2007, but it is now, and it's got some controls. Not all of the controls that you would find in the design view, just the more popular ones. For example, when I click on the More button, well, there's an extra one I didn't see. I don't see the line control, the option buttons control, the unbound and bound object frame controls. So let me go ahead and click off in a blank area and right click, go to the design view to prove my point, design tab, same tab, controls group, click on the More button. There's the line control, rectangle control. It wasn't there in the layout view. Also the unbound and the bound object frame controls, the option button. In any case, like I said, for more details, more controls, more features, go to the design view when you're designing your forms or reports. There's one thing I do like about the layout view is that I can view my records or the data within the fields here. Why would that matter? Well, let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and right click, go to the layout view. That when I'm navigating from record to record, let's say I come across one where the text box for that field is a bit tight or maybe too long, and of all the records it seems like that one is the longest one, so I can go ahead and select that text box, hover over the right hand side, click and drag it in to kind of do a best fit here, or if it's if it's not large enough, click and drag it out. Now I don't know if you noticed this, but when I selected this text box and I clicked and dragged it, just that text box, how it moved the other text boxes in and out as well. The reason why is because, and here's a good segue, is that a table format has been applied to the labels and the corresponding text boxes. How do I know a table's been applied to it? Because when I select one, or any of them, you get the, well, dots around all of them, and the little tag in the upper left-hand corner. That's the indication that everything within it has been grouped into a table or has a table format applied to it. Now the good news is with the table format, if you've got labels and text boxes kind of all over the place, you can go ahead and quickly select them all and apply a table format, and it will go ahead and organize it for you. This one is known as the stacked format here, where it stacks the labels over on the left-hand side and the corresponding text boxes over on the right. So they're aligned, it's uniformed, it looks great, right? So if you're in a hurry to create a form, to make it organized, you can go ahead and apply the table format, or one of the two. There's another one, and I'll show you that in just a second. The bad news is that when you apply a table format, as you just saw, what I do to one text box, it applies to all the others. So it's not as flexible. So let me show you. If I didn't like the table format and I want to remove it, I'd come up here on the Arrange tab, normally, and go to the table group, and there should be a Remove button, but not in the layout view. Again, here's the difference between the layout and the design view. The design view has a Remove button, but not the layout. So I have to right click, go to the design view, click on the same tab, arrange, and then come over here to the table group. It's there, but it's not highlighted. It'll only be highlighted when I select one of the cells within the table here. Then it'll go ahead and you can see that it's outlining all the other fields or cells there, indicating that all of them are in the table. And so I get the option here to remove it. Now the problem with this is that if I click on remove right now, it's not going to remove it from all the other cells here. So if I click remove, because I only have one selected, and I can hover over the upper left hand corner and click and drag it, well, it removed the one, but when I click on all the others, they are still part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit undo a couple of times, and then go ahead and in the upper left hand corner, click on the tag so it selects all the fields or cells within the table, then come up here and click on remove, and removes it from all of them. That way I get my little square boxes in the upper left hand corner. So when I click off in a blank area, select one text box, I can hover over that square box and move it around independently. Okay, move that over here and move this one right there. So if you're designing this from scratch, you're like, oh, I don't want to go ahead and click and drag these and align them, or use the feature that I talked about in an earlier training video, how you can go ahead and use the align feature. You know, select two text boxes and align them to the right or left of each other, or all of them for that matter. Instead, you can go ahead and select all of the fields here, you know, labels and the corresponding text boxes. And the quickest way to do it is hold down the control key and hit the letter A. That means for all. Then I can come up here on the arrange tab to the table group and click on stacked, and boom, puts them all together, uniformed and aligned just perfectly. That's the good news. Bad news is that it's not flexible, as we just went over. So there's the stacked one. Let's take a look at the tabular. Well, in the tabular, again, you want to make sure you select all the fields if you already have a table format applied to it, like the stacked. Otherwise, if I just go ahead and click off and select one, and then click tabular, it doesn't work. So let's go ahead and hit undo, and then click on the tag to select all the cells within the table, and then click on tabular, and that's what it looks like. How does that look in the form view? Right click, go to form view. So we have the labels up the top, the corresponding data fields, text box fields down at the bottom. I mean, there's quite a distance between the two. I can go ahead and go to the layout view or the design view to make some changes to bring them closer together. So if I right click, go to the layout view, let me go ahead and hover over the middle of the text box until I can see a four-way arrow. Then if I click and drag, it moves them all together collectively. And if I click up here and then I click and drag, it moves it down a bit. Okay. Well, that might work out, but what I don't like, at least with this table format, is that I have to scroll over to see all the others. I prefer them stacked and all grouped together within the same area here, not stretched out. Let me go ahead and hit undo a couple of times here. So I'm back to my stacked table format, and then really quickly, let me go ahead and select one of the labels and then hover over the right hand side of it, click and drag. Now, if I came up here on the Arrange tab in the Layout, I don't get the Size and Fit option, or if I right-click and I go to the Design view on the Arrange tab, I get the Sizing and Ordering, the Size and Spacing option, to where I can go ahead and do to fit. Let me click off in a blank area and reselect this one, and then try it again. Size to fit, because I want to fit the labels here. When I click on it, it selects the largest label and fits all the other boxes to the size of that label, and it was the book number label. Okay, so again, the difference between the layout view and the design view, you don't get many features or controls. Of course, you don't need that to go ahead and do a best fit in the layout view. Let me show you. Let me go ahead and click and drag and stretch it out. Right click, go to the layout view. If you just click and select the label, hover over the right hand side and do a double click really fast, there's the shortcut. So by now you get the idea that there are differences between the layout view and the design view. Now the anchoring feature allows you to take a label or a control or both and anchor it to a part of the form, either the upper left hand corner or bottom right or one of the corners. So let's say that I create a button right here instead, and I want that button to be anchored to the bottom right, even though I create it here in design view right next to the quantity text box field. When I switch it to form view, it will be anchored or displayed in the lower right hand corner of my form view here. That way I can still display things that aren't of importance or I don't want next to the main area of data entry, but yet I still want available, but as far removed from it as possible without disappearing. That's where the anchoring comes in, because if I go ahead and restore it with the anchor feature applied to it, and I come in and I resize my window, it'll move in and out. It will try to apply to the lower bottom right hand corner, or any of these corners that I anchor it to, no matter how I resize the form. So let me go ahead and maximize it, and right click in a blank area, go to the design view. Now for the sake of this training video, to show you how anchoring works, I think the best thing to do is, instead of anchoring one of these fields, like the text box field and its label, I mean, it wouldn't make sense to anchor it so it always displays in the lower bottom right hand corner or one of the corners. I'll go ahead and create a button here. It's a little bit advanced for what we covered so far, but bear with me and it should make sense. And this button, when they click on it, is going to close the form. So to do that, I'm going to come up here on the Design tab in the Controls group and click on, there it is, Button. When I click on it, and I come down here, notice how my pointer has a plus sign and the little icon of the button. Wherever I click it, it's going to dump it. As soon as I click there, the wizard opens up and says, okay, what do you want this button to do? Well, I would like it to do a form operation, and within the form operation, the action is to close the form when somebody clicks on it. Click Next, and then I can either have the default picture or choose one of my own. If I have an icon that looks, you can see in the sample, it looks like a door closing, or I can just use the text, select text, and you can leave it the default close form, or just close. That's fine too. Click Next, and we'll say it's my close B for close button. Click Finish. Now that I have it here, when I go ahead and I right click and I view the form, you see where it is right here? It's too close to all the other fields. I mean, it's not something that typically people will do when they have a lot of data to enter in. I don't need to see this. Instead, I can still make it visible, but anchor it to the bottom right hand corner. And so when they resize it, which I'll show you in just a second, it'll still be visible no matter what the size of the form is. Well, except in one instance, but I'll show you that in just a second. So let's go ahead and right click to the design view, select the control, then come up here on the Arrange tab, go to the position group, click on anchoring, and then it says, okay, where do you want to stick this guy? Do you want to anchor him in the bottom right of the form? So it doesn't matter how they resize the form, it'll always be in the bottom right. Yeah, select it, and let's take it for a test drive. Go ahead and right click, go to form view. Wow, there it is, cool. So if I go ahead and I restore it down, it still stays within the form view, and I don't have to scroll in the lower right hand corner. So the button's still available to me no matter how I resize the window, except, let me go ahead and right click and go back to the design view. If my grid in the details section, I click and drag it out like this and make it wider and don't fit it snugly around the field that's being anchored. So when I right click and go to the form view, it's not anchoring in the bottom right hand corner, is it? So you want to make sure that that grid is snug and tight. Right click, design view, click and drag the bottom, hover over the right hand side, and then click and drag and bring it in, and then right click, form view. Fabulous. Well, let's see if the button works. Do I want to save changes to this form, including the button with its bottom right hand anchor applied to it? Yes. Now, I know we covered this in an earlier training video when it comes to filtering and sorting our records within a form, but for those of you who didn't watch the video and you're looking for the keyword filter and sort records for the form, well, you found it. You don't have to watch the other training video, or if you don't come across it, then that's fine. I've got you covered here. So when it comes to filtering records within the form, for example, the book number field, if I want to filter this field for all the records, go ahead and click in it, come up here on the Home tab to the Sort and Filter group, click on the Filter button, gives us the drop-down arrow. From here, you can see all the book numbers here. I can go ahead and uncheck Select All, and then just check those that I want to see, click Okie dokie, and then down below, the record shows one of two that has been filtered. And you can see that the filtered is being highlighted there in orange. Also up at the top in the Home tab in the Sort and Filter group, you've got the toggle filter option as well, which means I can go ahead and click on it to remove the filter, but then I can toggle back to it to reapply it. And that will always be there, unless of course I close out and I don't save it, or I come up here and click on the drop down arrow and say I want to clear all filters. You can of course also, when in doubt, right click on the field and you get some filtering options where you can say I just want to see those records whose book number equals MS-200. Well, it's a unique field, so if I select it, I should only get one. Okay. I can also right click that field and clear the filter from the book number, which brings up a good point. When I click off in a blank area and I open the form here, somebody else has been working in it, and I'm like, okay, it looks like it's being filtered. I mean, it's the only way I can find out is by looking down here in the record navigation bar. If I see filtered orange, that means, oops, somebody's doing some filtering. I can turn it off by clicking on that to toggle to see all the records, but that filter's still being applied, and if I want to remove it, I can come up here and click Advanced to clear all filters, or if I know specifically which field that he's applied a filter to, because you can apply a filter to numerous fields, I can just go ahead and right click on it, to remove it. If you don't see clear filter from book number, it means that it wasn't applied to the book number. So if I right click on the title, you can see clear filter from title. It's not applied, but it is when I right click on bookmark, so I can clear it. And we're back to one of 20 records. Now for sorting, like you just saw here, when I right clicked on a field, I can sort ascending A to Z, select it. There's still 20 records, but it just sorts them, so I can look at all those that begin with the letter A, and as I advance to the B's, C's, D's, and so on. And then I can right click and change that to descending. To clear it, click off in a blank area, come up here on the Home tab to the Sort and Filter group and say you want to remove the sort, and we're back to where we started. There are many ways you can enhance the appearance of your form. I mean, don't leave it plain and simple like I do, unless of course that works for you. But let me show you a few things. You can add a title up at the top part of your form, something that says what it is. This is our book sales here. And then over to the right, maybe add a logo. Down at the bottom here, for these 6 fields, we could go ahead and rope them off or put a rectangle around it to highlight it or to emphasize these 6 fields, that when somebody opens the form, this is the point of interest. So to get started, let me go ahead and right click in a blank area, go to the design view. Now when it comes to moving our fields around, as you recall in an earlier training video, we would click and drag. If we needed to move a group of fields, we would select all of them, by holding down the shift key and clicking, or marqueing it by clicking and dragging, starting in a blank area, and then stretching the line or the marquee of the rectangle, and whatever it surrounds when I let go, it selects it. Now that's nice if I just need to do it one time, but if I need to go ahead and move these as a group quite a few times as I'm redesigning it, the operative word being group, we can go ahead and group this. That way when I click and drag one of them, all of them will follow. So to group it, go ahead and select all of them first, and then after that, come up here, click on the Arrange tab, go to the Sizing and Ordering group, click on the Size and Space drop-down arrow, and go down to Group. That's it. Click off in a blank area. Whatever I click on, just one, and I drag it, all the others will follow. Okay, let me go ahead and undo it. And then to unapply the group, or to ungroup it, go back to where we came from, Size and Space to Ungroup. Click off, click and drag one, it's ungrouped so the others don't follow. Let me go ahead and hit undo. Okay, let's go ahead and draw a rectangle around these fields down at the bottom here so we can have it offset against the rest of the fields. It's the point of interest. So to do that, come up here on the Design tab, go to the Controls group, click on the More button, and there it is, Rectangle. Click on the control, and as I move my mouse over the grid, you can see it's got a plus sign and then the shape of a rectangle. I'm going to go ahead and start in the upper left-hand corner in a blank area, then click and drag to surround those 6 boxes or fields, let go. And if I can't see the bottom border of the rectangle, I can hover over the bottom part of the grid until my pointer turns into black arrows pointing up and down, then click and drag, and there we go, we can see it. And then if I need to resize it, hover over any one of the resizing handles there until your pointer turns into black arrows pointing in opposite directions, then you can click and drag to resize it. And if you want to move it, then hover over the border of it, not a resizing handle, but until you see 4-way arrows there, then you can go ahead and click and drag to move it over. But if you're like me, when it comes to clicking and dragging with the mouse, I kind of overshoot it, and it's hard to get it just incrementally so you can use the arrow keys, and it's quite the jump with the arrow keys, but if you hold down the Control key and use the arrow keys, it's more minute, okay, the movements. And then I can click off, and then I'm like, okay, that looks nice, but I want to format it. Maybe make the color of the line red, and also give it a special effect, which you can do by when you select it. And by the way, if you can't select it because, you're clicking on it and you can't quite get the line there, well, as we learned in an earlier training video, you can select the objects over in the Form section here by bringing up the Property Sheet here, again on the Design tab to Property Sheet. And here's the selection list. Click on the drop-down arrow, and I'll scroll up. Whatever I select here, we'll select it over here in the grid, okay? So that could be helpful. After I have it selected here, then I can go ahead and right-click on it and get some, special effects, fancy. Come down here and let's do, looks like a shadow, select it. And then before we go ahead and take a look at it, let's change the color. With it still selected, I'm going to come up here on the Format tab to the Control Formatting group. Click on the Shape Outline drop-down arrow, and like I said, red, select it, click off, and well, it certainly does stand out. Didn't say it would look pretty, but nonetheless you get the point. It offsets it. I'm sure you'll choose something that looks more apropos. Okay, next let's go ahead and create a label or a title for our form here. And there's a couple ways you can do it. I'm going to come up here, click on the Design tab. One way is to come on the Design tab over to the Header and Footer group and click on the title. When you do that, it does a couple of things. First of all, it adds the form header section and then a label down below. and the default name of the label is, well, the name of the form. You can do it that way, or I'm going to go ahead and click off in a blank area. I could hit the undo button, but to get rid of this title, just select it, hit the delete key. Well, actually, let me go ahead and hit undo a couple of times to show you how you can bring up that form header section if you didn't click on title but you wanted that form header section to create your label for your form within. All you have to do is go ahead and right click on the detail bar, and there it is, form header and footer. Click on it, it brings up the form header. It's quite the small amount of space in there. I can go ahead and open it up one of two ways. Either hover over the top part of the detail bar there till you get black arrows pointing up and down, click and drag, or double click on the form header bar really fast to bring up its corresponding property sheet, and then over where it says height, I can click in there and delete the height and change it to 2, hit enter. Well, it opens up. We'll fix that in just a minute. I mean, I don't need that much space, but for now we're okay. Let's close out of here and let's add our label. By coming up here, Design tab to the Controls group, click on the Label button, come down here and you can see that I've got the plus sign with the icon there for the label. I can either go ahead and click to add it and just start typing, or let me hit the escape key so it doesn't save that, or I can click on it and then click and drag to get the size that I would like my label to be. And then I can go ahead and just start typing. Now I want you to know that when you're typing, you're in edit mode and you can't apply any formatting. For example, if I come up here on the Format tab, you can see I don't get any formatting options. Not until I hit enter and I'm out of the edit mode of the text, that is, then it'll allow me to go ahead and format the text within the label box. So then I can go ahead and say, well, the size is kind of small, let's do 20, and then maybe instead of Corbel, we'll go ahead and type in Algerian, hit enter. Oh, that's kind of fancy. When I'm finished, if I want to go ahead and resize the box to conform or fit to the contents they're in, you know, the title there, book sales, all I have to do is hover over the right middle handle and double click really fast and it does a best fit. Okay, next let's go ahead and insert an image, and we learned how to do this in an earlier training video by coming up here, clicking on the Design tab, and there's one of two ways you can do it. You can either click on the More button and click on the image to insert it, but as we learned, when I do it that way, the image doesn't seem to be or appear clear. It's kind of fuzzy. But I can do it the other way, just right next to it, clicking on this image button, which isn't available when I have something else selected. So I need to click off, then click on the drop-down arrow, go ahead and click Browse. And the image is in my Exercises folder, and the reason why it's not showing it is because it's looking for a particular file type or types. Click on the drop-down arrow and say we want to see all file types. Select it. There it is, Books. Double-click on it. And then when I hover over the grid, you can see a little plus sign in the image of, well, an image. Go ahead and click where you want to dump it, and there we go. Of course, I don't like the size of it, so I want to make it a little bit smaller by hovering over the lower right-hand corner till my pointer turns into arrows pointing in opposite directions. Click and drag it in. And if you get an image that doesn't quite fit within the box after you resize it, as you recall in an earlier training video, let me double-click to pull up the property sheet for the corresponding image. You can come over here to the size mode. By default here, it's set to zoom. You can choose stretch to fit the size of the box that you have, which I don't like it when it's stretched, or you can clip it, meaning that it keeps its original size, and what it can't fit into the box, it, well, clips it. So I'm going to go back to zoom because that looks good. Close out. Hover over the middle of the image till you see the four-way arrow. Click and drag it so we can move the image. And then I'm going to hover over the top part of the detail bar till my pointer turns into those black arrows pointing up and down, so I can click and drag that up to pull the detail section up just right underneath the title in the image here. As a side note, if there comes a time that you're working in the form header section here and you don't want it visible while you're making changes to it, well, first of all, let me go ahead and click on the form view so you can see it. Wow, that looks good. Oh, by the way, we've got an outline here. I don't want to see that, so I'll go ahead and right-click and go back to the design view. I've got it selected. Come up here, click on the Format tab, click on the Shape Outline, and let's set it to transparent. So when I click off, I mean, you can see it here, but that's just the box that it's containing it in. And I go back to right-click to Form View. It's transparent. You can't see it. So when I right-click and I go back to the design view, and as I was saying, if I'm working on the form header section and I don't want it viewable to the front-end user yet until I completed it, just go ahead and double-click on the form header bar to bring up its corresponding property sheet. You can see Visible is set to Yes, and I'm on the All tab. If I was on the Format tab, it would be up at the top. So Visible is Yes, double-click it to No. When I right-click, go to the Form View, it's not displayed. Until I finish my work, then I can go ahead and display it, okay? Right-click back to well, let me right click in a blank area, back to Design View, and then double click it to say yes, I want it visible. And then finally, we have what's called conditional formatting. I'll go over it a little bit more in detail in a later training video, but to introduce it to you here, and as part of our enhancing appearance with our forms, let me close out of the property sheet. I want to take a value field like the total sold, and let's say that I want to be able to display or show all those books that we sold between, let's say, 10 to 15 copies. In other words, I'm giving it a range here. And based upon that condition or criteria, between 10 and 15, let's format it like red. In any case, I have it selected. Come up here, click on the Format tab, go to the Control Formatting group, then click on Conditional Formatting. It brings it open. We want to create a new rule. And then down below it says, okay, if the field value is between 10 and 15, then I want you to go ahead and underline, and you can see the preview over here, and give it a fancy color, maybe something soft, not too harsh. Click OK. Click OK. Let's take it for a test drive. Right-click the tab, go to the Form View, and as the front-end user is whipping through the records here, see if something stands out. Oop, there it is. The total sold for this customer is between 10 and 15. Maybe that's our marketing. It's like, hey, if they bought some books but they didn't buy enough, let's go ahead and give them a discount. In any case, let me go ahead and right-click and go back to the Design View. If you want to remove it from this field, then just go back to where we came from, the Format tab, to Conditional Formatting, click on it, and then go ahead and select it and delete it. A combo box looks just like a text box field, but it has a little arrow in it that when you click on it, it drops it down, and if I did a combo box for the part number, it would list all the part numbers. But the problem I run into is that if I have a client that calls up and says, okay, I would like to go ahead and purchase the book title, How to Mow Your Lawn, unless I have the part numbers memorized with their associated book titles, I'm going to run into issues. So what I could do is I can go ahead and edit the combo box so that when I click on it, it displays not only the part number, but its corresponding book title. Now before I go ahead and replace this part number text box with the combo box, there's a couple things I need to be aware of. First of all, what is this form based upon? Is it a query or a table? Because if it's based upon a query, when it comes to creating a combo box, I may get duplicates, and I don't want to base my combo box upon a query. So let me go ahead and right-click in a blank view, go down to Design View, and I want to pull up the property sheet for the entire form. And there's a couple ways I can do it. I can either come up here and click on the property sheet. Of course, it pulls it up. And then once it pulls it up, if I have something else selected and not the form, how do I know if the property sheet is for the form? We'll come up here and you can see that the selection type is text box. To make it for the form, I can come over here and click on that little light blue square, and then it says form. Or I can click on the drop-down arrow and select form. That brings it up as well. Or close out. Probably the fastest way is just to double-click in a blank area off the grid, and it will bring up the property sheet for the entire form. Because here on the All tab, the record source, or the table or query that this form is based upon, it says it right here. It's a sales and profit query. So I come over here, open up the sales and profit query, and you can see I've got the part number listed here. Now I don't want to base the combo box upon this part number here in the query, because I could get duplicates here, meaning that, I got a lot of books that are being sold, and hopefully I got a bunch of orders for the same book. In other words, that book is popular. So if I create the combo box based upon this part number field in the query, then I'm going to have duplicates within that combo box, and that's annoying. I don't want to see that. How do I resolve this? Well, I want to find out what tables this query is based upon, so I can go ahead and select the right table that I want to base this combo box upon, or that part number field found in that table. Which table? I don't know. Let's go ahead and right-click the tab, go to the Design View. Let me close out of the property sheet. Here's a list of the 3 tables up above that this query is based upon, and they're all related by a temporary join, it looks like, from part number to part number. And this table is related to that one from customer ID to customer ID. And these 2 tables are related indirectly through the book sales table. In any case, we've got the part number field here, right? And it's added in the grid down below, but I don't want to base it upon what's in the query. I want to base it upon, well, there's the primary key here, the part number in the book project table. And I can do that as long as that table is part of the query. I'm not going to be basing it upon what's in the query here, but outside of it to the actual book project table. And as long as that table is part of the query and it's related, then I should be fine. That way I can avoid basing that combo box upon the part number here within the query that's going to have duplicates, okay? So let's go ahead and close out. To get started, I want to go ahead and click and drag to put a line through both the label and the text box so I can delete it. And let's go ahead and create that combo box. Come up here, click on the Design tab. Down here on the Controls, click the More button. Come over here, and there it is, Combo Box. Click on it, and then come down here, and you can see that I've got a plus sign and then the icon for the combo box. Go ahead and, well, I'm going to click right about there. The reason why I click there is because it'll add its text box, and then over to the left I got to leave room for the corresponding label for my combo box. It opens up the wizard where, again, the wizard's going to ask us a bunch of questions. We give it answers. Based upon those answers, it'll go ahead and create this combo box for us. We've got three options. I want the combo box to get the values from another table or query. I will type in the values that I want, or find a record on my form based upon the value I select in the combo box. We're going to go ahead and base it upon that table as I was talking about, the book project table. So we'll select it here, click Next, and there it is, book project table. If I wanted to base it upon a query, and there's no duplicates within the query, then go ahead and go to Queries, select the queries, or you can see both, queries and tables. Let's go back to Tables, select Book Project Table, click Next. And as you recall, when I click on the combo box, I would like to see not only the part number, double click to add it over here, but also the book title. Because I don't have the part numbers memorized, but I just want the part number to be displayed, and not the book title. Then click Next. And I would like to sort it ascending by part number. So when I click on the combo box drop down arrow, it's got it sorted from smallest to largest. Or I can click descending from largest to smallest, but we'll go with ascending. Click Next. Makes it easier to find if it's sorted. Now when I go ahead and I click on the combo box, if it was all done, I would just see the book title, not the key column, which is the part number, the unique column. So I can go ahead and uncheck that so I can see it. And if I want to do a best fit for both these columns, just hover over the right hand side of the column label, part number, double click really fast over to the right hand side of the book title, column label, till I can see those black arrows, and then click and drag or double click really fast. Then we'll go ahead and click Next. And then it says, okay, when you go ahead and you choose something from the combo box, you can store a value. Choose a field that uniquely identifies the row. As I mentioned in an earlier training video, when it came to the lookup field for a table, we wanted to use the primary key. I mean, that's the unique field, right? And that's the value that we would like to store, is that part number, not the book title. So we'll go ahead and you can see it's selected by default. Click Next. And then we want to say, instead of remembering the value for later use, after we select it in our combo box, we want to store that value, again, in the part number field. Now that's the part number field in our query, because as we backed up, notice the spellings, part number, the pound sign, is coming from the book project table, right? When we go next, it says, okay, you're going to be looking it up there, but when you select it, this form is based upon the query with the part number spelled out here, that field. Do you want to store it in there? Absolutely. Let's click Next. We'll call it our part number. Click Finish. Let's go ahead and take it for a test drive by right-clicking the tab here, going to Form View, and we can navigate through, and you can see it's updating the different part numbers. But now, here's the big test, the drop-down arrow. When I click on it, it shows me the part number. Well, gosh, it's kind of cut off here. I better go back and change the properties of it so I can see all of it. But it lists both the part number and its corresponding book title. So that way, I won't make a mistake when somebody says, okay, I want Believe and Grow Rich. I don't know what the part number is for it, so I can go ahead and just select the title. When I select it, it selects and displays the corresponding part number. Let me go ahead. You can see the pencil hit the escape key so it doesn't save it. Right-click, go back to the design view. With the part number combo box selected, let me bring up the property sheet by coming up here on the Design tab to the Tools group, clicking on Properties, and there we go, the column width. The first column width is not that large, so we want to go ahead and change it from 0.666, what a devilish of a number, to 3/4 of an inch, and then let's go ahead and take it for a test drive. Click on the View button, click on the drop-down arrow. Okay, that's much nicer there. I can see everything there. Let me hit the Escape key. The Option Group feature is a feature or field that you can add to your form where you can go ahead and add a list of options. For example, I've got my clients here and I'd like to add a list of options of how they're going to pay for their order. Is it going to be by cash, COD, company charge, or credit card? So to go ahead and set this up, I'm going to come up here, right-click in a blank area, go to the Design view, come up here on the Design tab to the Controls group, click on the More button, and there it is over here, Option Group. Click on it. XYZ, come down here and you can see the little plus sign and the icon representative of what I just selected. Go ahead and click, It'll open up the wizard where it'll ask a bunch of questions. We give it answers. Based upon that, it'll give us our list of options. So the first thing it asks is, what label do you want for each option? Well, like I said, I want cash as 1. Hit the tab key, C.O.D. Hit the tab key, company. And then when I'm finished, I've got these 4 options here. I'm going to click next. And then it says, do you want one option to be the default choice? Well, most of them want to pay via credit card, so we'll go ahead and select that and choose next. And then it says, okay, what value do you want to assign to each option? Because what happens is that this value is representative of that option that will store in my table. In fact, in my table, I already have a field for these options that I created, and I'll show you that in just a second. Let's go ahead and continue. Click next, and it says, what do you want to do with the value of a selected option? Do you want to store it in a field that I already have within a table? Or if I didn't create a field for it, I can just save the value for later use. So you can see here what I select here. If I have a field created for it in the table, billing info table, it will store it there. So I'll go ahead and select it, click on the drop down arrow, and it's my payment. How are they going to pay? COD, cash, credit card. In any case, click next. And what type of controls do you want in the option group? Do you want checkboxes or option buttons? I mean, we can go checkboxes if you like that. Toggle buttons. Ooh, that's fancy. So if I select COD, then that's the one that's going to be highlighted. Let's go ahead and go with checkboxes. And what style would you like to use? Etched, flat? I'm okay. I'm not picky. Let's click next. And then go ahead and name it payment method. Click finish, and there we go. You can see it displayed down below. Now let's go ahead and take it for a test drive and see what it looks like in the form view. Right click, go to form view. Now you'll notice that this is already checked. How come? Well, because it's looking at the values that are already stored for this client in my billing info table. Let me double click and open it up. You see the values here, 1 through 4. If I didn't have them stored, let me come back to the new customer form, you wouldn't have anything selected here. But I can go ahead and change it. And notice how when it comes to the option group, I can't check 2 or more. It's either one or another or the other. Let me go ahead, and you can see the pencil mark, hit the escape key so I can escape out from saving that. And let me go ahead and look at star temps by going to the billing info table, which is, by the way, it's the customer ID 31201. There's 31201. If I come in here and I delete that, shift enter to save it, I come back here, you see how nothing's checked? That way, if I just created the field but I haven't entered or checked any values there, then obviously nothing's going to be checked. So if I go ahead, and it used to be the option 4, if I go ahead and check cash and then save the record by advancing to another record, go back to my billing info table, and there it is. It stored the value 1, because 1 represents cash, and then go back here to COD, company charge is 3, and credit card is 4. And then with those values stored in the table there, if I go ahead and base a query upon it, or actually the new customer form is based upon the new customer query, which is based upon the billing info table and the customer. But in any case, within the query, with those values there, I can go ahead and say, okay, here's the criteria. I want to find out how many are set up to pay by cash. And then just go ahead and choose the criteria 1. All those customers that have 1 tied to it, representative of the payment method cash, will pull up. You can see as I scroll through the rest, some of them are company charge and others are, well, COD credit card. Form tab pages are pages that you can add to your forms with the tab up at the top for each page. So if I want to be able to view the first page, click on the first tab, the second page, click on the second tab, and all of it is within the same viewing area. In other words, the pages are stacked. In fact, a great example of this is just right up above us. It's the ribbon. You can see up at the top they've got their tab pages. Well, they have their tabs, but when you click on it, it's not an entire page. This viewing area that they're utilizing is really small, almost like a ribbon. When I click on the Create tab, it'll update the same viewing area, but with different commands. What type of commands? Well, something that's got to do with create, so that's a nice keyword. When I click on it, you can see I can create tables, queries, forms, reports, and so on. So to get started, what I want to do is I want to create a form from scratch, and then I'll show you how you can add tab pages to that form. So I'm going to come up here to the Forms group, click on the blank form. And as you recall, in an earlier training video, we talked about when it comes to using this template, that over here in the field list, it only allows you to base this form upon tables. You can go ahead and click Show All Tables, but I don't want to base this form upon a table. I want to base it upon a query. So to get around this, I'm going to go ahead and right-click in a blank area, go to its Design View, come up here on the Design tab to the Tools group and click on the Property Sheet, And then over here, the source that this form is going to be based upon is going to be, when I click on the drop down arrow, this query here, new customer. Select it, and then before we add the fields, I want to add those tab pages and then start adding fields to each page, group them by page. And I can do that by coming up here on the Design tab to the Controls group, and there it is. Tab Control. Go ahead and click on it once, move your mouse down into the grid. You see the plus sign? That means that you want to add. What do you want to add? Well, it shows the picture of the icon down below, the tab controls, so let's click on it to add it. By default, it gives us 2 pages here and the corresponding tabs to click on, about yay big. If you don't like the size of it because you know that you're going to be adding a lot of fields, let's say to page 1 and a few to page 2, well, we need to make it bigger. Just hover over one of those sizing handles, either the right middle or the bottom right, till your pointer turns into arrows pointing in opposite directions. Then just go ahead and click and drag to stretch it open. Now, I don't like the name of these pages, page 1, page 2, at least, well, okay, I do, but the front-end user who's going to be entering in data and viewing it doesn't know what page 1 means or what it is. So let's go ahead and rename it. And before I do that, when you look over here in the property sheet, you can see that what's selected is the tab CTL for tab control. And then if I want to come back over here and click on page 1 to work on that, it updates it. So I can go ahead and change the name from page 1 to client or basic client information. Now, if I like the name page 1, page 2, but it doesn't work for the front-end user because, again, they don't know what that means, I can go ahead and keep the name here, the name of the control, or the first tab page here, and come down here in caption, type in a name that will update the name over here for the tab, but without overriding or deleting the original name here. Because as I mentioned in an earlier training video, when it comes to designing a database, I have my own naming convention that the front-end user is not always going to understand or agree with. So let's go ahead and type in client and hit enter, and it updates it here. And then let's go ahead and add some fields by coming up here, clicking on the Add Existing Fields button. Let's go ahead and click and drag customer ID, customer name. See, really simple. Okay, let's go ahead and go to page 2. Right-click on the second page there, and go down to Properties to bring up its corresponding property sheet. And again, I don't want to change the name. I like page 2 when I'm in Design View, but for the front-end user, it's going to be known as Contact. Hit enter, and it updates it here. So let's go back up, click Add Existing Fields, and let's go ahead and click and drag the contact person's last name, first name, and we'll say the phone number as well. Click and drag that. Now, before you take it for a test drive, you may have questions like, well, how do I add more pages, delete pages, or move the tab order around so instead of client being first, I now want contact? Well, all you have to do is go ahead and select the border, click on the border, there we go, and then right-click on the border, and you get those options to insert a page, delete, page order, and tab order. So I can insert a page, there it is, I can right-click on it, delete the page, right-click again, select the page order, and say I want contact first, move it up, click OK. That doesn't work, does it? Let's go ahead and right-click and go back to page order and move client back up to first position, click OK. And then we can right-click and go down and tab order. And the tab order for this tab, when you get to the tab, as you recall in an earlier training video, when we were working on our forms, has a list of all the fields. When they come to the tab, when they hit the tab key, this is the first field that it's going to tab to, second field and third field. If you want to move them around, as I mentioned in an earlier training video, just go ahead and click on the row header so it selects the entire row for the field that you want to move. Then click on the row header again and drag it to move it around here. Okay, so I know it doesn't make sense. When the first tab is going to be last name, and then you tab to the phone, and then you tab to the first name in any case, but you can make those changes. You also have auto order, which what it does is it orders it as it's displayed here in a hierarchical structure. Whatever's on top is going to be the first one that you tab to, and then in the middle, and then at the bottom. Okay, well let me go ahead and click and drag this, and let's take it for a test drive. Click Okie dokie, and then come up here, click on the View button so you can go to the form view. When I'm here and I hit the tab key, it goes from last name to phone. When I hit the tab key again, it goes back up to first name. So set your tab orders right. And then if I go ahead and keep hitting the tab key down in the record navigation bar, you can see I'm on 1 of 14. If I keep hitting it, it'll eventually toggle through and go to the next record. Tab, 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 3. One last thing that I want to show you is the style. They have 2 styles here. You can have it as a tab up here to display each page when you click on the tab, or you can have it as a button. Now for my theme, it's not going to be much of a difference. The tab is open where a button is going to be closed. So if I right click and go to the design view, I want to bring up the property sheet for the entire control. So let's come up here and click on property sheet. If the control isn't selected, you got something else, then click on the border. If you can't click on the border to select the entire control, like it says here, tab control, then click on its drop down arrow and look for tab control and select it, and it'll go ahead and select it here. Then over in the property sheet on the alt tab where it says style, click on the drop down arrow. You get three choices. You can have tabs, buttons, or none. I haven't figured out why people would want to use none, but let me go ahead and go back to buttons here. And you can see the difference between a tab and a button with my theme is that the line goes right underneath it. Doesn't seem like there's much of a difference between the two, but in any case. Click on the view button. There's the line representative of a button. Go ahead and click on either one. And thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.